Welcome back, sketchers. Today I'll show you how to draw 4 different cloud types. Any questions, please leave them in the comments. Timestamps are linked below. Let's get into it. Star 1. Cumulus clouds. To draw these types of clouds, all we need to do is draw a rough shape that's flat on the bottom and more bumpy on the top. And there's not really any rough shape a cloud is. It's just, it can be any shape really, like literally. There's not really any specific shape, but just make sure it's more flat on the bottom. Vary the size, vary the shape, vary the length of each of the clouds that you draw, and that will give it a very natural sort of look. These clouds can literally be found every single day. They can be used for practically anything. They're just like these sort of clouds you really see in the sky. Once you've done that, we're now going to add small irregular bumps inside the clouds, sort of like this, which will eventually help us create a more 3D effect towards the clouds and give it a more defined shape. Now let's give our clouds more depth, and to do this we're going to get a dark pencil or press hard on our pencil and basically fill in the bottom of the clouds, sort of making it look more like a shelf, I guess. If you don't understand, please look at the screen. We want an effect which sort of looks like this essentially. Now, pressing faintly and probably using the style of our pencil, we're going to basically go back over every single bump that we've made, like this, and this will help it give it a bit more dimension. Oh, and don't forget the very tops of the clouds as well. One more note I would like to add as well is to make sure the top of the clouds generally have less shading or less hard shading as we're getting more to the top, and that will give it a bit more dimension as well, as the clouds will be darker towards the bottom because we're moving away from the sunlight. Okay, now we're going to get into the bit which is the hardest to explain. What we want to do is add a gradient to every single bump that's getting lighter as we go down. Let me just show you the final result of this. That is what our aim is. Although feel free to add in extra tone and extra shading patterns into large sections like this, otherwise it might look a bit unnatural. Okay, if we imagine every single bump that we've done is a bubble, what we're going to do now is we're going to shade on the side of every single bubble, which will help give it a 3D effect. And whilst you're doing this, you might want to go back over the original bumps that we made too. And hopefully you should be looking at something like this. Let's move on to the second type. The second type is Cumulonimbus clouds. For this type, we need a sort of like anvil shaped cloud. Still very random and still very rough, but this time we want the top of the cloud to be wider than the middle of the cloud and the very bottom to be the very widest. We effectively want this sort of shape. Now this sort of cloud is commonly used in thunderstorms and dense clouds, but it can also be very good for horizons as well. Like, you know, when you're gazing out towards the beach and the clouds seem as if they touch the water, that sort of cloud. But unlike that wispy looking shape we saw in the example, we want a more fluffy appearance. And the best way to do this is to compose the middle section of much smaller clouds like I've done here. Next, just like before on our Cumulus clouds, we're going to basically draw small bumps once again, but this time we want these bumps to be more in groups. So 2 or more bumps can be very close together. And another set can be more towards the top, more towards the bottom. Honestly, it's very random. But we don't want bumps above this area. Once you get to the bottom, I recommend making the bumps even more compact, as this is typical of clouds of this type. And if necessary, add some more clouds at the back. Now for the tedious part. We're going to basically do the same thing as we did before, as in emphasize all the bumps, going over the side of your pencil, but for every single bump and for every single edge of the cloud. This is going to take a while. Well done if you got through that bit. What we're going to do now is emphasize the outline of the bottom of the cloud. And this is basically to sort of add the base of the cloud, like underneath. Here's the effect we want to get. So for the next bit, we're going to basically shade underneath all the different small bumps that we've already defined and gone over. And just create a little bit of a gradient, I guess, moving down. Do this for every single bump. You want to do this a lot more often and a lot more hard towards the bottom of the cloud, but do it a lot more lightly when you get towards the top of the cloud. And once you finish with that, we're going to add a shadow towards the side of all of the original bumps of clouds that we did at the beginning to create a sense of depth. I mean, after this, you're pretty much free to make any changes you want, but that is pretty much the end of the Cumulonimbus cloud part of the tutorial. Let's move on to the next part. Type 3, Cirrus Clouds, specifically the ones which look like sheep wool. To do this style, we're going to draw small, round, irregular shapes of similar sizes with smaller ones in between, which will help make a sort of like sheep wool effect, very similar to the clouds that we're trying to draw. This is best used in much higher up clouds or smaller clouds. Once you've made all your individual clouds, you might want to try to divide up some of these clouds too, like this. And all we need to do this time is essentially create a sort of like raindrop effect really on these clouds. And what I mean by this is we're going to shade in a select corner of the cloud. And then we're going to make a gradient, getting lighter towards the top of the page. And we're going to basically make a sort of 3D effect, like this. Do this for every single cloud. And believe it or not, that's all you need to do. Let's move on to our final style. Style 4, Stratus Clouds. I unfortunately don't have an image to show you for this, but sometimes clouds can be formed in sort of rolls rather than the sort of like sheep pattern. And as the name suggests, we're going to draw long, irregularly shaped, worm-shaped things, I guess. Each worm will have to be the same width, but at varying lengths, and must follow the same direction. Here's what you want to really get out of this. And last but not least, we shade. Select a corner of the worms, shade it in. For example, I'm going to be using the left of the worm, like I'm using here. And we're just going to really just make them look more 3D, so darker towards the edge, lighter towards the top. And we do this for every single bit. If you ever need advice for shading things in, please check out the above video, which will show you basically everything shading wise. It's really useful. And once you've done that, we have reached the end of the tutorial. There is no more clouds I have to show you today. If you have reached the end, thank you so much for watching. If you do want to find very similar videos to this, check out this playlist above, which will show you how to draw water realistically, how to draw grass realistically. And if you want to hear my views about AI art, definitely check out this video. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments below. But if not, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Catch you later!